So, before we start debating whether federalism is right for the Philippines, I think we really need to pin down what federalism actually is. It gets thrown around a lot, but what does it mean in practice?
You're so right. Sometimes people imagine it's just splitting the country up, but it's way more than that. Federalism basically means dividing power between a central government and smaller regional governments like states or provinces. The whole point is to balance local autonomy with national unity.
And that structure is meant to give regions more say over their own affairs, instead of everything being dictated from the capital. It's a pretty big shift from the current setup in the Philippines, where the national government calls most of the shots.
Exactly, and if you look at countries like the US, Germany, or Australia, their federal systems have managed to keep things running smoothly while letting local leaders handle issues unique to their areas. But that raises a big question. How did this idea start gaining traction in the Philippines in the first place?
It's wild, but the push for federalism in the Philippines isn't new at all. There were discussions about it as far back as a century ago, though things really heated up in the 1972 with the separatist movement in Mindanao.
Yeah, that movement eventually led to the creation of the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao in 1989, a kind of experiment in regional autonomy. Leaders have been calling for more federalist reforms ever since, hoping to calm regional tensions and give local communities more power.
Then fast forward to 2016 when President Duterte made federalism a central promise. He really believed it could help tackle poverty, corruption, and inequality problems that have dogged the country for decades.
But the thing is, making that kind of change is massive. It would mean rewriting the Constitution, building new political structures, and facing all sorts of resistance from people who worry about corruption or losing control. It's no wonder the debate is still raging.
That actually leads perfectly into the criticisms of the current system. Right now, the Philippines has a unitary presidential system. The president is basically at the center of everything, while provinces mostly follow orders from Manila.
Honestly, critics say that's a huge part of the problem. Power is so concentrated in Manila that other regions get sidelined. It's created this lopsided economy. Most of the country's growth, investment, and even infrastructure is packed into Metro Manila, while other regions struggle.
And that centralization has also led to underdevelopment and a lack of representation for marginalized groups. People keep saying local leaders know their communities better, but they just don't have the authority to act.
Exactly. Both Duterte and Marcos have pointed to these issues as reasons to explore federalism. But critics argue the 1987 Constitution might not fit a federal model, so there's a real legal and political mountain to climb.
So, let's talk about the upsides. Supporters of federalism in the Philippines are always talking about four main benefits: regional autonomy, decentralizing power, fairer resource distribution, and boosting regional development. Which of those do you think would make the biggest difference?
Regional autonomy jumps out for me. If regional governments had more control over things like natural resources or local policies, they could actually tailor solutions to local problems. For example, Mindanao could finally manage its vast resources without waiting for Manila's approval.
And decentralizing power could help cut down on bureaucratic delays and maybe even reduce corruption. Manila wouldn't be the only place where decisions happen, and that could mean real improvements in local governance.
Plus, if resources were shared more evenly, schools and hospitals in far-flung provinces might finally get funded properly. It could be a game changer for regional economies, not just Metro Manila.
But of course, federalism's not a magic bullet. There are some serious worries, especially around corruption. Giving more autonomy to local governments could make them even more vulnerable to patronage and misuse of funds.
That's a real fear, especially since local corruption has been a long-standing issue. Some people point to countries like India, where certain states have soared ahead, while others are stuck with poor services and bad governance. It's definitely a risk.
And let's not forget, the cost setting up a federal system isn't cheap. Drafting new laws, building regional governments, and making sure everything runs smoothly could stretch the national budget pretty thin at first.
Plus, if regions start competing or fighting over resources, it could create even more division. The Philippines already faces regional disputes and ongoing territorial issues. The last thing it needs is more conflict.
What surprised me most is how countries like the US or Australia pulled off federalism with a good balance of power. They show it's possible, but only if there are strong legal safeguards, accountability, and ways to resolve disputes.
Totally. And if the Philippines is serious about federalism, it needs to learn from those examples, especially making sure resources are distributed fairly and transparency is built in from the start. Otherwise, the same old problems could just get worse.
It feels like the real question isn't whether federalism is good or bad, but whether the Philippines can design and implement it carefully enough to actually fix what's broken.
And even then, federalism isn't the only option. Strengthening local governments or reforming elections could also shake things up for the better. But whatever happens, reform is clearly overdue. What the country really needs is a system that delivers for everyone, not just those in the capital.